All right, welcome to our quarterly Intelligent Buildings Council webinar meeting. My name is Marta Klopotowska of ASHB, and I'll be emceeing the slides today. Before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that today's meeting is being recorded and will be distributed to those who registered, along with a link to the presentation slides. Before we pass it over to Bob Allen, our council chair, I just want to do a quick review of the agenda. We'll begin with a call to order, welcome introductions about the IBC, just a couple administrative items. We'll do a quick research update on the research that ASHB is currently working on. We will then get into our keynote for today. Brad Bonfiglio from Schneider Electric will present on cybersecurity best practices, safeguarding your network and building systems. We will just go over a few of the ASHB programs, our podcasts, white papers, our research library for those that are members. You do have access to almost 1,000 or so white papers, research resources. If you're not sure if whether you're a member or not, let us know. You can reach out to us. We can let you know if you are indeed, or we can talk about what the steps would be for you to join. We'll then finish off with the journal. We'll go over some new business if anyone needs to bring any new business up. And then we'll go over couple of announcements and of course the adjournment. So with that, I will pass it off to Bob Allen, who is the IBC chair.
Thanks, Marta. Really appreciate that, and welcome everybody to today's call. Certainly an event that I look forward to every quarter, hearing from some of our peers here in the industry, as well as the wonderful keynotes that we have set up. As Marta mentioned, my name is Bob Allen. I'm the VP of Sales for NAVCO. We're a national security integrator, electronic security integrator company, and also the chair here of the Intelligent Building Council. I would like to welcome the vice chairs, Harsha Chandrasekhar from Honeywell, Robert Lane from Lane and Associates, and Chris Larry from EXP US Services. Thanks, guys, for joining us. As we all know, the IBC is a part of ASHB, established in 2001. We focus on advancing the large building automation industry through cutting-edge technology research. The council, which meets quarterly, reviews opportunities, strategizes, and oversees initiatives related to systems integration, automation in large buildings. The projects that we foster aim to look at next generation of smart building technologies, as well as enhancing building performance and energy savings with a comprehensive approach. So again, very excited to have everybody on the call with us today. A little bit of change in kind of our administrative portion of the call. In an effort to streamline, I'd like to let everybody know that the minutes from November 7th meeting are available on the ASHB website. We're no longer calling for motion anymore. We are just automatically accepting those. If anyone reviews those minutes and finds a discrepancy, please don't hesitate to reach out to Marta, and she'll review that and make any necessary changes. So appreciate everyone's support on that. Moving right along, I think we're going to talk to Greg here for a second with some of our research updates. Or is Harsha taking this? Okay, sorry about that. Harsha, are you with us?
I can take it over.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate introduction. Just update on the am I audible?
Sound is breaking up.
Harsha, your connection is very challenged today.
Yeah, sound is breaking up.
Do you want me to take it over, Harsha, and then hopefully get it fixed later on?
Probably the thing to do.
Yeah. Greg. Okay. So, all right. Thanks a lot, Bob. So, this is the landmark research project for the Intelligent Buildings Council. So we do a couple of these landmark research projects every year at ASHB, and one in the residential side, one in the smart buildings one. And at this stage, we went to an RFP. We developed a really like a smart home trends and adoption technology research project that we've continued for the last couple of years, and this would be the third year. We have 13 funders on the project so far, so we're in the early stages. We're getting the funding in place, and we went to an RFP and we selected Harbor Research to conduct the research project. It's going to look at it's about an $80,000 piece of research that's crowdfunded by the members, and only the members or those that participate in the project get the full research. But essentially, we're doing a survey of 300 commercial building owners and operators throughout Canada and the U.S., mostly in the U.S., serving on trying to get the perspectives on the industry, what industry needs, what the outlook of the industry is, and then a report based on that. In addition to that, there's three quarterly market technology tracking reports where essentially some market sizing, research, and technology tracking for various different, all the major metrics in the smart home space. And in addition to that, there will be a deeper dive and a smart building trends analysis into 5 to 7 topics in smart home space in general. These topics will be selected by the steering committee and those that are participating, and then each one will be a separate chapter in the research project with infographics associated with that. And then there's going to be steering committee meetings where the funders can get involved and shape the research project. So if anyone's interested, the cost to get involved is either $5,000 or $10,000. So $5,000, you join the research project, you get the full results, and $10,000, which is the most popular level, you get that, but you also get to be on the steering committee and shape the research project, and also get a special webinar for your organization at the end of the research. But if you're interested, contact myself or Marta or anyone at ASHB, and we can have a separate call to get your organization on board. So with that, we maybe go to the next project. So this next project is not really a landmark research project per se, but this is really an invitation only project that we've been doing for the last 4 years, and we have one more year left in our 5-year project, and we'll be continuing it on for hopefully another 5 years is the goal. But we have these funding partners on board, but they're essentially sharing BACS data, market sizing data, so building automation control system data. We're working with BISRIA to anonymize this data and giving them the aggregate so they can identify their market share and various different metrics. We're looking at things like software solutions, so like supervisory software, analytics, energy and BEMS software, some hardware like BACS control gateways and BAS network routers, for example, and then some controls, so like building controls, room controls, and HVAC field controllers. And we're looking to expand this this is a North American project. We're looking to expand it out into Europe as a separate project. So we can hopefully continue this on with a different group of players, some of the same, but with additions in the European market in the upcoming years. So if your organization is on this funding the project and you want to get more information about the data, feel free to reach out to us and we can get you in touch with the right folks, and so you can get access to this research.
Yeah, Greg, question for you now.
Yep.
Where it was invitation only, is that information going to be disseminated out at some point, or is that information being kept with the invited sponsors?
This is one of the projects where we don't even have an executive summary. So this is going to be for just those that they're invited, and they're invited because they're typically providing their market share and their market numbers. And then when we aggregate it all together, we get we provide the sort of the holistic numbers. So that's they're getting invited based on their share of building automation controls, like BACS.
So once the data is scrubbed, basically, then we'll be publishing some sort of synopsis of what was pulled together.
No, for this project, no. So this
Okay,
project is really
understood.
just for the funding groups. But the other project for the building trends and technology adoption, we'll have an executive summary that gets out to the members, and then we'll publish some of the some associated infographics and provides some sort of data out at different industry events. But the full research for that project even is only available to the funders.
Gotcha.
But this one is more of a side sort of project that for those that are contributing data for the market sizing backs.
Great. Appreciate that. And if nothing else, that really kind of emphasizes the importance of being part of these research projects, not just to get your logo on the screen, but the ability to really contribute and shape the marketplace. So appreciate all we do with that respect.
All right. With that, I guess I'll pass it off to Bob.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Bob
Thank
Lane.
you. Well, it's my privilege to introduce our guest speaker today. Really, his title of his speech is Cybersecurity Best Practices in Safeguarding Your Network and Your Building Systems. Brad is the National Director of Consultant Solution Architects at Schneider Electric. He leads an international team that delivers high-performance building management solutions for mechanical and electric consultants and facility owners and managers. He is a subject matter expert in OIT, IT technologies, including building management systems, fault detection analytics, open protocols, Division 25 solutions across sectors such as healthcare, data centers, higher education, and government. He comes with 25 years plus experience in building solutions, security, and energy management. Brad holds a BS in industrial engineering from the University of Florida and an MBA from the University of Dallas. He's been with Schneider Electric since 2007. Previously, he served as the Southwest Regional Channel Director and is a certified energy management. Brad's also been recognized as an industry speaker, presented at many conferences, including ASHB, Engineered Systems, Consultant Specifying Engineers. And he previously has served as the president of the North Texas Association of Energy Engineers. So Brad, it's over to you, and let's hear about safeguarding your network and building systems.
Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and share my presentation here. Let me know if you can see the full screen.
Yes, we're good, Brad.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for hosting us. Marta, I really appreciate you reaching out last year to make this happen. This is a topic, and I appreciate the introduction there. As you can tell, I have white hair, so I've been in this business just a little bit. I always say 25 years because it's actually longer than that, but I figure that's safe. But I do want to talk about cybersecurity best practices and what you can do with your own network. Now, when I say this presentation is not, we're not going to get into the weeds, okay? We have an army of folks within Schneider that can get into the weeds when you're dealing with government projects, especially around the risk management framework process. We actually have consultants that actually consult on that. That gets into a whole lot of details around NIST and the risk around NIST and following those procedures. We're not going to get that far. What this is a high level of anything IP connected, okay? Anything that is intelligent and has an IP connection in the building. So that's what this is geared towards at a very high level, practical level of what we can do. I've got about 30 minutes here. Marta will kind of let me know if there's questions in there. You're welcome to ask as we go through this. Our agenda will be, in other words, you don't have to wait to the end. Please, you could ask on the slides that I'm at, and I'll try to answer them as we go forward. If not, we'll answer them at the end. Either way, I'm pretty flexible. So today we're going to talk a little bit. I've got just a couple slides. If you don't know who Schneider Electric is, we're going to go through what is cybersecurity, what is that definition. I'm going to give you some examples of data breaches. This is sort of the eye opener of, wow, we're in this era right now of vulnerabilities. and it gets more and more each year. We're going to go through some of the risk-based approach, and again, at a very high level. And then we're going to dive into defense in depth and go through each of the steps that help prevent you from the risk of cybersecurity attack. Best practices. What are some of the things you can include in your specifications or projects that can help, or things you can read about that can help you identify what are some of those best practices I ought to be looking for. And again, I say Q&A, but you can ask as we go through. So hopefully this will be a little bit of an education to you. Most of the time when we present these, there is an aha moment that, wow, I didn't think of all these things. So this is a concern for everybody. So glad to share this, and we'll go through each step. So a little bit on Schneider Electric. If you're following the building automation industry, we're a little bit beyond just building automation. We get into electrical, we get into data centers, we get into industrial applications, we get into software solutions. So we're a manufacturer of software and hardware. These are some of the companies that we've acquired over the years. And what we've done is, as we acquire them, we integrate all the technology, all the software suites into what we call EcoStruxure. And EcoStruxure pulls all the data from all these systems into a common front end that we can pull data out of, called EcoStruxure Web Services. So as you see some of these brands, you may know us sometimes better than with the brand, Squirty being one of the bigger ones out there. But from our acquisitions, we came through acquisition through the building automation side, and that's what I'm looking at. But again, if it's IP-based controls of any type, even getting down into the meters and field devices, this is the stuff that you got to be aware of for cybersecurity threats. How do we go to market? This is the last slide I have on kind of who we are. We have over 200 certified factory representatives across the market. So even though we're a manufacturer, we have only a few factory offices. Most of our distribution and sales goes through our certified channels, which we call partners. If you have questions on that, you can reach out to me later. And I'm not in the sales channel, but I can help you, direct you to the right sales channel in your market if you need help. And we have some really very large, very good integrators across the country that specialize in different certifications with different vertical markets. Let's go next slide. Cybersecurity. This is really around breaches in building controls, and it doesn't have to be building controls, but we're going to relate that to this conversation here, obviously, as it relates to the Intelligent Building Council here. And you're looking at, it's not just the risk of being attacked, but it's actually, and I want to highlight this, it's really the damage. I want everybody to think about, if you think about it personally, it's your home, right? And you think of data breaches, and I'm thinking like, okay, my credit card, right? My social security number got compromised. That's me personally. When you think of a business, a lot of you in companies, and I'll pick on Schneider here, we don't want our name in the paper, right? So we want to make sure we do everything we can to help prevent a cybersecurity. So when you think about this, you're really think about it from not so much a personal, but a reputation standpoint in the market. And this is where I try to coach a lot of consulting engineers out there that do your due diligence, and put as much cybersecurity protection as you can in your specification to help produce and prevent liability later on in case there is an attack. Right? And we'll go through some of those best practices in a little bit here. And you can go online. There's all kinds of, this is Kaspersky. There's all kinds of third-party websites you could go to actually look at real time where the attacks are going on in real-time situations. And it's pretty frightening when you look at all the attacks that are happening in real time. So let's talk about breaches. 2024, and I got this from one of the recent trends from Nordlayer, Trends and Statistics, about the biggest data breaches. So I wanted to highlight something that's a little bit, if you will, up to date. 2024 was one of the worst. So when you think it's getting better, it's actually getting worse. The average data breach is now cost 4.9 million, and ransomware is 5.2. So you say, well, we're seeing this all the time, right? You hear companies, in fact, if you just Google cybersecurity breach in your web browser, you'll find a ton of companies that will hit, and I'll show you one in example in a second. But I will say, though, that you think about it, ransomware, you say, well, this doesn't really affect buildings too much. I literally know a customer that had they used their computer front end for their building management system. They literally were using it also to search the internet. And this building engineer, and I'm not putting any blame here, they somehow got ransomware. Okay, the ransomware locked up that computer. This is a real case. Locked up the computer. They wanted money for this. I don't remember the dollar amount and all that, but it literally locked it up. Well, unfortunately, this customer did not keep up with all the patches and updates on the software itself. And by the way, it was a really old copy of the software. It hadn't been updated in years. And in fact, it was one of the copies of the original that was discontinued, and they didn't upgrade it to the latest rev. It was several years old, and it locked up their computer. So they couldn't use the BMS. So their options were at this point, pay the ransom or reprogram the entire site again. By the way, they didn't have backup copies. So when you think about this, what they ended up doing, what I found out later, is they ended up paying the ransom and unlocking the computer. But this is a real example of just innocently searching the internet on the same computer that your BMS is and locking up the software and didn't have a backup copy to do that. Marta, it looked like there was a question or a hand raised.
Yes, it was from David Katz, but he was going to wait until a little bit later to ask. But basically, he's just asking if we could bring into the conversation data to AI ML and how to protect it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're opening up our systems, including yours, that we are opening a door if we say, hey, let's put in AI and let it look at it. So
that could probably do an hour presentation on that. And I say that, I haven't done the research, but it's probably could be an hour. AI is changing the world on this, right?
Yeah.
So I think when you see, I think the message is, I don't have this geared towards AI, but when you see 2024 was one of the worst years on history of cybersecurity front, I think you're going to start seeing AI escalate that even further. As we go forward. So looking forward in the future to see more on the AI. I don't have this geared towards that.
No, I agree. And also, like, I'm on a committee with NIST, and I think we should use it both positive, like let AI find the breaches and how to fix them, and then don't let them get in our door. Thank you.
Exactly. And then the things that you could do to help prevent that regardless is some of the defense and depth steps. But you're 100% right. It's going to get AI is going to change the world and how we can actually test our own equipment, like through NIST, and how it's actually going to change the world where it'll help get more, it'll actually produce more cybersecurity attacks as they get more sophisticated. So it'll be interesting to see in the next several years how this landscape changes. You're exactly right. So a couple statistics here, intellectual property. And then you're looking at just the different customers in the actual breaches. On this one, I just wanted to highlight, because I did a little bit of the research. So the national public data was actually hacked last year, and I say that it was compromised. 1.3 billion last year was personnel addresses, social security numbers were actually exploited. And if you think about it, that was the largest. You think 1.3 billion individuals of data was pretty bad. Actually, it's not the worst. There's worse than this in the past. This was just the worst in 2024 as far as the number of records that they exploited. And this is where you get back into AI, right? Method unknown. They literally have no idea how it was breached. That's what the biggest takeaway here is. We don't even know. So when you look at incidents, a lot of this is still unintentional. right, versus intentional. And that goes back to the NIST and going through and looking at the risk rewards and the risk at different levels of this. But again, most of it's unintentional. I gave you the example of the ransomware. You do get where disgruntled employees is you look at the intentional. That's a big part of this, you know, just having IT standards of locking folks out in your organization as they leave is a big part of that. You can see that's where the intentional might come in. Every 39 seconds, I've actually looked it up recently too in 2024. It's actually a little bit less than that. It's actually 34 seconds, if my memory serves me right. So it's gotten a little more, but it's not like one every second. So the next step in here is, you know, cost of the cybersecurity. And I'll go back to, you know, if you look at this, you've got all kinds of lost revenue, productivity. Obviously, you've heard about like manufacturing facilities that get locked down or have a problem. But I go back to the largest category is damaged reputation. You know, whether it's myself or a competitor or a consulting engineer, I don't want my name in the paper, right, for this. This is huge of looking into the market and finding out what it is that we really don't want to do. This is it. So be thinking about that as you think about cyber attacks. All right. Well, where did it begin? It began back in 2010 with Stuxnet. If you hadn't heard that already, it was the first time we actually saw in the market where there was an attack on a, if you will, a control system. In this case, it was an industrial PLC system, but this was the first time they started targeting something that's related to our business. I won't go into all the details. It was done by a USB key that actually put malware on the system itself and then actually put in a virus as well. So both of those contributed to down production, and this happened to be a nuclear facility, by the way. When you get into commercial controls, I don't know if you all remember Target. Target was the breach where it went in through the temperature control system. Now, I don't even remember the manufacturer of it, so that's not the point. The point out of all this was that it went through a BMS. They targeted the BMS. Okay. The real point of this is when you get into defense in depth, and we get into that in a few slides, they didn't have the HVAC control system segmented off their IT network from their point of sale. The IT team chose to have it on the same exact network. And when they went in through the BMS, they actually were able to exploit this point of sale. And that's where they were able to get the breach, okay, with all the data records that they took. And when you see they actually paid $18.5 million back then, but here's a big kicker. Their profits fell 46% the next year based on that attack. And it lost $520 million in value. Now, since then, I haven't done the research on Target. I'm not picking on Target. I'm just saying these are the things that can happen in the market if you're not familiar with your IT network and how the structure is. So reducing cybersecurity, a risk-based approach. This is where, you know, just identifying the assets you have, the threats. You know, this gets much more into getting into the weeds of NIST around what it is you're looking at from a particular site, the vulnerabilities and so forth. And then consistently existing controls, you know, how do you manage your passwords? How do you look at this? These are all things that you have to look at when you're trying to reduce this. It's not just a magic box you plug in and everything's good. And then I'll show you that here in a second. So when you think about commercial security, cybersecurity, it's more than just IT. You know, you got your physical layer, your IT layer, and then you have your OT. Right? These are the folks that are in the facilities that are trying to manage their site. And there's this conflicting priority, right? The facility managers want access to all kinds of information where the IT group really wants to lock everything down. So nowadays, we try to coach folks and saying, hey, get with the customer's IT department. Let's find out what it is they require so that when we put in a BMS or a power management system or whatever that's going to connect or could future connect to their system, what are some of their standards they look at, and then what can we adhere to? This is a big deal. Most times I recommend upfront in a construction, if possible, get with the customer's IT department to find out what it is to some of their standards, because it may not connect to their network today, but it's more than likely going to do that down the road as they get into remote connection and be able to look at their site remotely. So let's look at the OT reference. So now we're getting into a building. And at the basics, I kind of just wanted to outline some of the different layers that are in here. And you may not have thought about all these. So at the bottom, you have the physical layer of the devices that might be like the air conditioning equipment in this case. The second layer would be the field devices. Now, most of these are just analog type devices. But nowadays, as we get things that are more intelligent, those are actually IP driven. BACnet IT specifically. And so those BACnet IP devices go up into the network controllers. This is the supervisory level. And I'm keeping this very generic in nature. The supervisory is typically where you would have the BMS. So this is your BMS in your building. And then you have, and again, this is how it's defined by Purdue, is they go through a 2.5. Sometimes you'll see these layers as a 2 and a 3, not a 2.5. But the idea is this is the cybersecurity OT network. So remember when I talked about Target, what they didn't do is they didn't have this firewall in here that protected them from their operations. They had that missing. It was all on a flat architecture. They didn't have a VLAN or anything else that separated them, didn't have a separate firewall. So in that case, that was their challenge, is when one was compromised, it compromised the other. And then you get into the operation layer 3. This is like the customer's mail servers or the customer's payroll, those type of things, right? And then you have a further IT connection that will be a firewall. And this is preventing it from getting to the internet or outside a building, in this case, to layer 4, which is their corporate. So you might have an entity with a building in one location where they're going to go and sync up to corporate. For example, Schneider has data centers all over. My email is not physically here in Texas. It's not physically here on my computer. It's Microsoft Studio 365, and it runs up to one of our data centers somewhere, right? So this would be that representative of going to corporate, and then corporate blocks that off from going to the enterprise or the cloud. So again, so just in this example, 1, 2, 3 layers, okay, of firewalls. And then I'll go through the defense in depth and show you where you can actually have more layers of firewalls included as well. We typically don't get that level until we get into mission critical type facilities, which might be a hospital, data center, a utility company, and so forth. So let's look at defense in depth. And this could be, again, for any type of strategy that a customer has that has an IP device that may be compromised, right? What is your security plan? This is typically developed by the customer of how they handle their security, how they handle their assets, how they manage their passwords. So that's typically in every customer. And then you have your network separation, which is again, back from that. We want to get this as the next layer from the internet. We want to keep network separation between all the systems. We want to do perimeter protection. And these are all related to just the different layers I just showed you on the previous slide. Network segmentation, device hardening, and then monitoring and updates. So we'll talk about each one of these as different steps throughout here. So potential avenues of compromise, as you see, again, this is a generic representation of very much the layers I just walked you through. But as you can see, there's multiple injection points. Everything in red could be some type of infection point in there, okay, that could cause a compromise. So this is where the vulnerabilities are not just from the top. It could be anything. It could be a USB key, affected logic, infected laptops, what have you. So let's talk about the security plan. This is typically the customer where they define all their roles, activities. Most of your larger customers are all going to have this in a binder that you can actually sit down and go through. The kind of the idea from a consultant perspective or a BMS manufacturer is, hey, do they have a plan? If they do, it'd be nice to know in the beginning, for example, what are their password policies, right? So when we create passwords in the BMS, and we're going to turn this over to the owner, what does the consultant have in the spec as the different layers or fields you need to have for compliance? And then what is the customer expecting, right? And what are they setting up for templates? And then you get into communication paths. And I'll give you some examples here. When you're dealing with like large corporate entities that have multiple facilities, and I'm going to pick on a healthcare facility. A healthcare facility, you're not literally between one building and the next. You're not literally putting in like a fiber backbone in a lot of cases. A lot of cases, it is going to connect to the customer's network. So they might have a list of devices that they could say, I'm going to give you this many ports in our network switch for you to connect to. And then I'll talk about what some of those ports mean and how you can blacklist and whitelist some of those ports that go into that. But this is very common. And then the customer will typically outline what are the threats. Again, it depends on, this gets into the whole details of the NIST and around what their security plan is on how much risk and mitigation they want to do. Password management, I won't go into the great detail other than there's a lot. It's not just give us a password protection. It's things like strong passwords, don't have a backdoor. These are often the things that are missed. Another example is if you have a customer that is on a site and you put in there like XYZ company that helps service your account. Well, you put in one login for them, but there's 4 technicians that actually work on their site. Well, you need to put in a login for every technician that comes to your site to work on it. That way you can track if there's any problems in there of who's doing what or where the problem entailed. Having one login for a supplier or a vendor is not good enough. Looks like, Marta, there were some questions.
We have a question from Mitch. Any recommendations on DID for Wi-Fi enabled space sensors? I had a client who approved it. However, the IT team shut everything down after they were installed. The IT group felt anyone could get into the Wi-Fi sensors and leap across the network.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some best practices to help you answer that. If my understanding of the question is Wi-Fi, a lot of IT folks or customers will turn that off. That has been our experience as well. They feel that no matter what, they don't like Wi-Fi on the network. I'm not saying it's less vulnerable than other things. It is vulnerable. Obviously, if Wi-Fi, you can access it easier than going on a wired network, right? So what I have seen is, especially like even government agencies, they'll turn off everything Wi-Fi on any of the sensors. They'll literally, and this goes back to the site hardening, right? They'll go back and say, as part of this, when you're setting this up on our network, you must disable the Wi-Fi network. That is very common. Though I say that, it's more of a misunderstood in most cases because you ask why do we have to disable it, and they usually don't have an answer other than IT prevents it. When you go back and you look at the customer site, sometimes that they open up their networks to Wi-Fi, meaning that they have access, but they probably segmented on the network. So a lot of times it's just misunderstood of how to use it. And when you get into the OT or facility management, it's easier to shut it down and then to worry about access for it. So most of the time, yeah, you're gonna, if you manufacture products, and a lot of them that we do, you actually have an option to disable that, and most clients will require that. So yeah, good point. Appreciate you bringing that up, but that is common.
And Brad, we also have someone who's raised their hand. Fareed Baharai, would you like to unmute?
Is there a question?
Fareed? You'll have to unmute.
I'll tell you what, in the essence of time, why don't we wait and we'll open this up at the end then, and you can ask that question.
Sounds good, Brad.
Yeah, let's continue on. In the essence of time, I want to be respectful of everybody's day to day. Defense in depth is step number 2. Remember, we showed you at the top level, we want to protect the system from the internet. Believe it or not, when the BMS is exposed to the physical internet, there's no firewall in there. We literally, our cybersecurity experts actually do get a call. It does pop up. Sometimes that actually is the FBI calling us, letting us know there's something exposed to the world. Okay. And so these are things that are big deals. So obviously the first thing is you're going to have some kind of, they call it a DMZ, by the way. The firewall is a demilitarized zone. Okay. And you want to separate that. So the first level is getting it out from the DMZ. And when you do this, a lot of times, especially when you're getting into third-party analytics and software where you might be doing something in the cloud, okay? And for example, one of our offers is building analytics. Our analytics is done in the Microsoft Azure cloud. Well, in order to send that data there, I have to send out through the firewall. In that case, we have a one-way port that we typically work with the IT staff that we open up, and they identify what it is, and it's a one-way push out, not in, and most of the time that's significant for them. So again, just working into looking at blocking traffic in or out and what that needs to be. Mail servers, another one. Email servers, remote access, those are all things you're going to have to work on of how you get access in and out. And by the way, the DMZs, basically the firewalls, it could be cloud, it could be server related, hardware related. There's all kinds of different ways that we can do that. It looks like there was another question here. Marta?
We have a question from Richard. We see customers wanting Bluetooth turned off on endpoint devices, even if not connected to anything other than a smartphone. How large of a security risk is Bluetooth?
It's like anything else, it's just another means for access. Most customers are just nervous about anything wireless and will tell you to turn it off without even really having. So you go back to step 1, what is their cybersecurity policies? And a lot of times it won't define it, it'll just tell you to turn it off. So I'm not going to, in the essence of time, I'm not going to be able to go through like the differences between Wi-Fi, hardwired Ethernet, serial communication, and Bluetooth. We won't have time to go through there. But again, it goes back to regardless of whether it's easier or harder to penetrate, it still goes back to what the customer will allow on their network regardless. And so just those are things to think about, again, going back to the client and saying, hey, what do we need to do here? So in the essence of time, I don't have time to answer that, but if you want to send me an email later, I can get you some further details on that.
And Brad, we have one more. From a product design standpoint, at what extent collecting data from end users is safe for them and legal for the manufacturer?
I'll tell you what, if you can reach out to me separately, that sounds like a long discussion to have, and I'll need a lot more details on that to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of legal means involved in here, especially when anytime you're dealing with software. In any type of system. So just reach out to me separately. You'll have my email, and then I'll help you try to find out a little bit more information. The third step, as we continue on, we talked about step 1, step 2. This is the next layer. So the first layer was getting it from the internet. The second layer is literally getting into the email servers, the report servers, or the customer's type of information, or it could be report servers, right? And again, just another layer of protection between the networks here. We typically call this whitelisting. So a lot of times with our BMS or systems at this level, we're only going to allow systems that we know are there in and out. So basically that port will allow this IP scheme and it will not allow any others. So that's how they start limiting the protection across this. And then when you get into remote access, again, going back to clients and what they allow, VPN is the way to go. Virtual private network. This can be done through routers. Most of the switches and stuff, especially like a layer 3 switch, could be, all these can be set up that way through the software of the switch. Or you could actually add some software to the computers and do it through that level. Most of the time I see it through routers and switches. So one of the things we do see very common is when we work with owners is they'll set up, we talked about VLANs, virtual local area networks. These will be set up. And so, for example, I wanted to show this as when we work with a typical client, they might have their own IP network in there. And what they'll do is set up VLANs. And this is that segmentation we talked about of trying to keep things separate. So, for example, VLAN 10 and the IP scheme there might be the BMS. VLAN 20 might be the fire alarm system. VLAN 30 might be security, and on and on and on. When you get into hospitals, you might have a bunch of more VLANs for all the low voltage systems. So again, working with your clients to figure out which VLANs and how to set that up if you're working on a client's network is a big deal. If you're in a commercial office and it's a standalone building, a lot of times this is not always in play because we don't have any guidance on that. So in that case, you're only dealing with one network, one priority in the system. The next one is the perimeter protection. And this is, again, another firewall in the network we just showed you and how they would set it up, how they would set up the ports, how they would allow different schemes, how they would block it. This is how a firewall works. Rule replacements, UDP ports. This is how you're setting up these networks to be able to communicate back and forth. So from a manufacturer, what does this mean for me? It means I need to be flexible in the products that we are putting software and hardware in a building so that we can make sure we adapt to the client's network if this ever chooses to connect to their network. Okay, and anything is a big campus or a building to building connection, you'll probably end up dealing with something like that. The fourth level is your segmentation, another layer in here. We don't normally get into that layer. This is where they go into every single device and they start looking at actually whitelisting and blacklisting all the devices in there and then looking at passwords and setting up unique passwords in each device. This is really what you might hear is like site hardening. And these are setting up the firewall rules within the product. You might see it as a system that I've typically seen where only the connection to the customer's network. A lot of times it won't get into the sublans of the BMS. So for example, we might have a network controller that is primarily on the customer's network. Those are typically set up with firewall rules as well as the software. When you get into the sublans and you start getting into the IP schemes that might be DHCP underneath an automation server or network controller, when you get into that, it's rare that the IT staff gets involved downstream. The next exact section we're going to talk about is actually getting into this level where we actually get into a fifth level, and rarely do you see this. You see this, again, this would be done in more critical facilities, data centers, some healthcare, critical industrial applications. They'll get into that last layer of what we call device hardening. And these are all the things, if you ever go through the government and you're doing an RMF process, risk management framework process, they'll go into this level of detail on every step. All the steps you just saw with defense in depth, they'll go through every one of those with you to make sure their site is secure, which actually adds quite a bit of cost to the job to do this. So be aware if you're dealing with government information, you want to be, or government site, you probably want to give us a call or whoever your current provider is, because if they want to go through the RMF process, there's a lot of extensive data to do that to be able to ride on their network and look at that. So again, looking at some of the devices, computers, and software, you'll go through every single one of those with an RMF process. And then network switches, of course. So the last step is monitor and update. So hopefully the client has some type of audit reporting on their IT staff. This is where if it's just a standalone building and they're putting this in and it's a standalone system, they probably don't have much of this. This would be done, if anything, part of the maintenance contract on the BMS or security system or whatever it is, to where you might be able to look at that and see if there's any errors in there, any compliance issues. Anyone logging in that shouldn't be logged into the system, these are the audit logs. that's basically what you're doing. But if you're in a larger customer network, like a hospital, they might have their own networking software that actually looks at all these ports and decides on, hey, is this should be there or not? And this is looking for all these attempts that someone might be attacking the network on. So some of the best practices, we don't see this a lot in specs. So, you know, we think about BMS security systems, they don't really get into a network security in enough detail. One of the ones that I see that is just, I recommend putting this in every specification is antivirus software. Even though we don't make antivirus software, you want to put something in there so that at least during the warranty period, there's some type of antivirus software to help prevent any type of intrusion on the system. And I've actually had engineers say, well, I don't put that in there because the owner usually provides it. Well, my recommendation is put it in there anyway. If it gets VE'd out or someone removes it later, at least the risk is not on your end, where you've done everything you can in the spec to make sure that's a most secure network as you can. And then when you get into, this is the next question around switches and VLANs. You know, if you don't specify in the document, or you don't specify as a customer the network switches, and especially if you want to look up what a layer 3 is, which is a managed switch, most of the time they'll go down to Best Buy and buy whatever you need off the shelf, which typically is not something the customer would want on their network, right? So the idea is if they ever go into and that network gets connected back to the client's network, they're probably going to have some issues with how that network was installed in the network switches. This goes back to, hey, the more you can work with your IT staff up front, the better you're going to be with knowing what they might want as their network switches and so forth in a facility. And then we talked about diaphragm, the RMF process. This is the dealing with the government. Again, we have a whole government group. If you have any questions on government projects or you're related to one, give me a call and I'll get you to the right person. Collaborate, I've already kind of highlighted a lot of this. You know, access points, is it going to be allowed? Is it not going to be allowed? Switches, network switches, mail servers, all these things are things that you may need to talk to and consult with about on each site, depending on what they'll allow. And then some best in class that I wanted to highlight in here is, you know, look at some documentation around the IEC 62443, which is the life cycle security, full secure development life cycle practices is associated with that IEC. So look for manufacturers that have that listing. You'll see NIST, make sure they follow the NIST 800 guidelines, compliance with the RMF, which we've talked about extensively, cybersecurity policies, there's an EC 27034, encryption levels. If you didn't know, encryption, some of the older encryptions, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 and 4 are coming out. 3 is sort of the latest. 4 is coming out shortly, if not already released, and some other things in there with audits and so forth. It looks like there was another question.
No, I think that was Marta posting your contact info.
Okay, perfect. And then so that's it. That's all I had. I want to be respectful of the 30 minutes. I did have a couple links in there that 5 best practices to improve BMS cybersecurity. It's a white paper on that. And then I've actually got our portal to where literally if you ever identify anything as a problem or you want to talk to somebody, we actually have a whole portal set up for our cybersecurity team that you're welcome to go to that link and actually ask questions as well.
And we will share
Bob
the
Allen
slide.
here. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Marta.
Sorry.
Brad, Bob Allen here. A couple of real quick questions for you.
Yeah.
I'll kind of put them both out there at the same time. I can answer them. But how often do you see or have you heard of in the industry where people are paying the ransom and they're not getting their information back? And second is you'd mentioned earlier about one of the kind of the side effects is damaged reputation. Do you feel like the general public is getting numb to that? Because I'll be honest with you, I think I have LifeLock for every year of my life now. Yeah, every month I'm getting a letter from somebody saying, hey, we had a problem.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, even as a consumer, we get those all the time that, hey, your data was breached and you may be affected. I can tell you last year, I think personally, probably from these data breaches, though I can't pinpoint it, I've had to get a new credit card, like I think 4 times, if I remember right, last year because my data was compromised, right? And I'm pretty particular about where I use my credit card. And you got to kind of almost think of, well, they probably figured out a way to get my data, right? So you're right. It's almost a reoccurring thing that's happening. I would say we are numb to that until it's your company in the paper.
Sure.
Right. That's where and when you say paying the ransomware, I don't know the statistics because I don't think they've ever been published of who pays the ransomware and who actually didn't get their data back. But there are cases of even like municipalities. And there was a state, I won't pick on them, but if you Google, there was a state that actually had all their city, a fire department, police department, their general buildings that help the public all got locked down on their network. My understanding from the last I read on it, they paid the ransom. It was cheaper than actually paying to go redo their IP network. Now, in fairness, they did have a budget. They did pass for future to come back and site harden and actually improve their network. But it wasn't it was something around $5 million to where it was cheaper to pay the ransom than to do all the things they really needed to do with their network. Not saying they aren't, but they just had to raise money to do it. And my understanding is several years later, they did spend that money to improve it.
Thanks. Appreciate that insight.
Yeah. In the case of, to answer your question, the case of that building that I was referring to where the malware locked down the system, the ransomware, they ended up paying that. I don't know how much it was. I didn't get all the numbers from, most people are pretty embarrassed to tell you those, so it's not going to be public. But, there are cases like that, and that happens more often than not. It just depends on how much they're asking versus how much it takes to fix things.
Brad, we have a question from Mitch. Would you consider CAC cards for federal sites a DID solution for device hardening?
Can you repeat that?
Would you consider CAC cards for federal sites or common access cards for federal sites a DID solution for device hardening? Okay.
My experience has been that they're using a CAC card to basically lock down a software or a computer. That's just another version of a firewall, if you will, to protect that, to make sure that the person that's supposed to have that is actually the one logging in. I'd go back to step 1. What are the cybersecurity best practices that the owner has? And it looks like if they are implementing that is a good mechanism for them, obviously, that might lock down a computer that would be related to only logging in with a card. So that's just one of many ways that you can lock down, information without someone else getting to it. I'll give you an example of a client, a financial institute we've worked with before. And just to give you how much they lock down their system, there is no outside access to this because it's a financial institution. So any updates that we have, any patches or anything, we can't bring a laptop into their building. They won't allow a laptop from our technician. We can't bring in a USB port. They literally make sure we don't have any of those on us when we walk in the client site. And this is not a government agency. This is just a financial institution. None of those are allowed. The only way we can download software and get them updated is they have to actually be on their network and they have to go to a secure site that we have to drop software into it to be able to do the update after they test it. So it gets pretty crazy when you think about some of the requirements of the government agencies, in this case, a financial institution, of not allowing anyone to have access to the site.
Isn't it about time we started this, Brad? We have far too much problems in this area. We got to get with it. We've got to get our builders to realize that just buying insurance isn't the answer to solving their cybersecurity problems.
Yep. Follow the defense in depth as best you can to help you protect it. And this could be like even yourself at home, right? All your Wi-Fi devices you have. How many folks have a Nest thermostat or have connected devices in their home?
Oh, ridiculous. Who puts their banking on a cell phone to pay their bills? And you go to a Second Cup or any food store and you tap your phone. Ridiculous. You're just heading for problems, folks.
And
That's
I
the
think we'll
world we
finish.
live in, isn't it?
Can we ask a question, General?
I think we could just finish off with one last question, David, if you want to go ahead.
Okay,
and
this
ask
is I think it's very important. At the Smarter Summit, the Consortium for Buildings, Smart Buildings joined the Linux Foundation. The goal is to get more openness, to bring down the silos. We clearly need to be smarter buildings that have information exchange. And many of the things, I agree with you. So how do we overcome that? We need the HVAC to know what the fire system is doing. We need the access control to tell us how to do the HVAC. So how do we bring down the silos to get that interoperability, Division 25, as you pointed out, or the IBB, and yet bring that cybersecurity over? Is it just the ins and outs of these exchanges between, or it could be a different challenge?
Well, it's in the case of a project, I always go back to bringing in the IT staff from the client, right? Because that's really going to define where they have a process hopefully in place that you need to follow. And every client's going to be different. Every client's going to be different. So, but I guess if there's an organization that's looking at the OT side of it, how do you bridge that with another organization on the IT side? Right? How do you bridge like an OT and IT? So maybe bringing two organizations together and having a forum or some type of organization that combines the two might be a good step for that.
Thank you.
Great. Well, Brad, really appreciate your time today. Super presentation. We had great interaction from the team. So you certainly brought some value to the table. Looking forward to just kind of seeing how the world continues to adapt to all this. So with that, let's pop over and get an update on our ASHB podcasts with Chris Larry.
Thank you. So I hope everybody's aware of the podcast that ASHB has. We would like to take a moment to highlight the ASHB Smarter Home and Building podcast.
Greg Pedersen, can you mute? Thank you.
ASHB's platform for industry leaders, innovators, and experts have these podcasts to share insights on their future of the smart building and homes industry. ASHB is always looking for passionate voices to join as hosts or guests. If you have any expertise to share and want to spark some meaningful conversations, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to admin@ashb.com to get involved. Our latest episodes dive into, the first one is data migration in smart buildings. Next one is rethinking commercial real estate. And the third is strategies for critical environments. You can access our recently recorded episodes by visiting our website at www.ashb.com/podcast. And then we'll go to
Awesome.
Ken for
before we jump real quick, first off, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And just kind of a heads up to our membership. If you are looking to do a podcast and you want to get your content out there or talk about a specific topic, there's many of us, myself included, who are happy to moderate those for you. And whether it's just yourself or bring in a couple of guests and turn that into hopefully a valuable podcast for the rest of our members to listen to. So thanks, Chris, for bringing that to our attention. Ken, would you like to talk about the white papers?
Sure. The Intelligent Buildings Council has had a program since inception to create original white papers. We use them as introduction to new disciplines that are relevant in this field. Typical papers are half a dozen to a dozen pages. If we require more in-depth, for example, we may have multiple papers that have introductory materials, market materials, technology materials, like we did when we examined technologies for communications within buildings called Li-Fi, which is a version of communication via light instead of radio. We have not had proposals recently for IBC white papers, but we're always open. The proposer comes with an idea, maybe an abstract for the paper, and then we will put together a small committee to help the proposer with the ideas and with reviewing the work product. We also survey the literature for papers published elsewhere that are relevant for CABA members, the ASHB members. The ASHB Publication Review Committee will review and provide an analysis of papers that are relevant in our field. We have a review form that asks for a 100-word summary. It asks the timeliness of the paper, and most importantly, asks for a few keywords so that our library of more than 1,000 research papers can be searched for particular topics. We will accept papers that mention particular brand names as long as they're used as an example to illustrate the topic in the paper rather than just a marketing push which says we're the only game in town, buy from us. So Marta, what is our total now in our library of reviewed papers?
I think for the current papers for the membership access, we're at approximately 700 to 800. And then for the public research or public library, we're, I would say, close to 1,000, if not over.
And the difference is the age of the paper. Is that right? After 3 years, it becomes public.
That's right. So anything within 3 years of age will be accessed by membership only. Anything outside of that would be public, so anybody can access those. And then if you are looking to access the members only papers, reach out to us, or you could use the login at the corner of the page using your email address. You could just reset your password if you're not sure if you have an account. If you do have an account, you'll receive a reset. If you don't have an account, reach out to us. We'll double check to make sure you're a member, and then we will provide you with your credentials.
Marta, are there papers to be reviewed, or you send those out? Well, we'll let Ken finish.
We will shortly.
Okay.
We will. I would say probably in the next month or so, I'll have a whole new list for everyone.
Okay, I have a few I'll send you.
And
Thanks.
a special thanks to the CABA staff for searching for papers. Of course, anyone on the call is welcome to propose papers. So as an added bonus, we offer $25 in cash for reviewing a paper, plus $25 credit for ASHB products. So consider that the ASHB thank you for the time it takes to read the paper and write the review form. Another topic I want to mention is CABA has a publication called the ASHB Journal. The ASHB Journal has in various forms been around since the creation of ASHB and its predecessor, CABA. What Marta's putting up is a recent article that I wrote. I've been writing since the inception of CABA, since the inception about 30 years ago. I wrote first for the CABA Journal, then for the magazine iHomes and Buildings, and that's now morphed into the ASHB Journal. So it's an opportunity to teach us about a new topic, tell us about a trade show you went to, Just keep it relevant to the smarter home and smarter building domain. So thank you very much. And just as Marta showed you, all these materials are available at ashb.com. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Really appreciate the update and all of that. Cool. Moving on to new business. This is where I'd like to open it up to all of our members. If anyone has a suggestion on any new business, new keynote ideas, new white paper ideas, new projects to discuss, any agenda items that we should add to our quarterly meeting. So please give you a second here to step up. Just feel free to unmute and make your suggestion if you have it.
This is David. I just returned from the AHR Expo, and of course there was a big building automation section there, and many very good sessions in the educational stream, including I think ASHB on one or two. My suggestion is I'm learning more about the indoor air quality ASHRAE standard 241 and testing, and so I think we should maybe revisit that. People are returning to work. The flu season is worse than ever, I'm told, and COVID hasn't gone away. So I think there's a new area that we can look at what is ASHRAE doing and what is CABA or ASHB doing to help our members in indoor air quality and making buildings healthier.
Thanks, David. Good suggestion.
And there is a meeting on it in, there is a new ASHRAE standard 241 that people can purchase and see the scope.
Excellent. Any other suggestions? All right, hearing none for now. And of course, you can always email myself, Marta, or anyone else at ASHB should you come up with something that is not, that you didn't mention today. We are going to our second to last segment here, our announcements. Harsha, were you able to get a better connection?
Yeah, I hope you can all hear me.
All right, perfect. Great to have you.
Thank you. I'm going to announce the upcoming events, some of which ASHB is attending and having a booth, and you'll get to kind of know where we are participating. Firstly, it's IFMA World Workspace happening in March 12th and 13th, Netherlands. And Distribute Tech happening in March 24th to 27th in Dallas, Texas, followed by ISC West, March 31st to April 4th in Las Vegas. Light Fair happening May 4th to 8th, again, Las Vegas, and both ISC West, ASHB is attending, and in Light Fair, ASHB is attending as well as having a booth at the show. Haystack Connect, May 6th to 8th, Washington, D.C. ASHB is attending and has a booth at the show. Followed by Controls Con, May 8th and 9th at Detroit. ASHB is attending and having a booth at the show. And lastly, Realcomm IBCon in June 21st in Tampa, Florida. Here again, ASHB is having a booth at the show.
And my apologies, Harsha. I think we provided you with the incorrect information. Realcomm is actually June 3rd to the 4th in Savannah, Georgia. So my apologies for that, Harsha. And thank you, Robert, for pointing that out.
Sure. Thanks for that. And over to Bob for adjournment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Harsha. I appreciate that summary and the clarification. So that kind of brings us to the end of our meeting. And because we've done away with motions and all that sort of stuff, I really feel like I have some huge authority here because I get to close this out. Just a PSA, we're targeting May for our second quarter meeting. The official date will be announced as we get a little bit closer. But again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us in that interim. So with that, I will officially close the meeting. Keep an eye out for minutes that'll be posted to the ASHB website. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Brad, for being a great guest and giving us a great presentation. Have a wonderful day.